Hello, everyone. Welcome to this quarter's Ask the Experts webinar. You are at the right place. We are a few minutes before the hour, so we are just waiting for more people to join us. We will be on silent mode, but we are all here. You're in the right place at the right time, and we're just holding for additional attendees. So we'll be with you probably on the hour. Hi, everyone. I see you, see more and more people are joining. So welcome and thank you for joining us. It is the hour almost. I think we have one more minute. So we're gonna wait 1 or 2 more minutes because I can actually see more and more people joining us. And then we will start. There's no waiting music, so we're just gonna wait in silence for a few more minutes until a few more people join. Thank you for your patience. Okay then, hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to ADOC's Q2 Ask the Experts webinar. My name is Ariella Shoham and I'm ADOC's Vice President of Marketing. I'm extremely excited to be able to run our quarterly webinar. This is, I think we're already into our 2nd year. This is a series of webcasts that we host introducing new trends and real use cases in the world of AI and radiology. For those of you who have joined and don't know us, we offer a comprehensive suite of always-on AI solutions that help radiologists identify critical findings and optimize their workflow. Today, we're going to talk about integrating AI into the radiology workflow, and we're very excited to have Michael J. Cannavo with us, but you probably know him as the PACSman. Michael has extensive experience in evaluating image management requirements and proposing workable implementation plans for PACS, VNAs, and related technologies across hundreds of hospitals and radiology groups nationwide. And he's going to be chatting with Elad Valach, our CEO, about the practical do's and don'ts for implementing an AI solution into your workflow. Before I hand over to Mike, let me just draw your attention to a few housekeeping items. You are all on mute, but you can submit questions throughout the webinar. We are going to run for 30 minutes, and we are going to leave between 10 and 15 minutes at the end for questions. So feel free to submit the questions throughout. I will be moderating them with you in text, and when we open it for further questions at the end, again, I will be directing your questions to each one of the presenters. So without further ado, Mike, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Ariella. Thank you, Elad. Appreciate the invitation. First thing we need to understand is get an understanding of where the AI market is. I'm actually a little bit older than the AI market, not much, but it traces back all the way back to 1956. But with the exception of several movies, most notably 2001: A Space Odyssey, AI has been sort of in the background. In the past 3 to 5 years, you've shown leaps in AI development. There's been much faster processors, much better algorithms, more data available. But frankly, one of the drivers behind all of this is data analytics, because AI brings those data analytics. And when you put AI with data analytics, it becomes more and more important to healthcare and helps provide better patient care. Why AI is important now? Over the next 3 years, there's a 10-fold increase in data, and it just continues to increase. We've gone from 4.4 zettabytes to 44 zettabytes. That's 9 zeros after 44. So it's interesting to understand that there's 2 categories of AI. Most of AI is called narrow AI. Just look at it as single function, does one thing. General AI has all the characteristics, which is language, recognizing objects and sounds, learning, and problem solving. We will ultimately get to that somewhere down the road, but right now most of AI is narrow. There are so many prognosticators in this marketplace about where AI is going to be and where it's going to go. This was Signify Research did a study, and they estimate that in 2023, the big 3 are going to be breast, cardiovascular, and the rest of the body. But it's pretty much nobody knows where AI is going to go by clinical application. Liver obviously is the smallest of these, but you can go just about in any direction. So, but right now, I mean, the interest right now is definitely in neurology, is definitely in cardiovascular, and definitely in the rest of the body, and breast is up there as well. So. Vendors. There are more vendors in this market than you can shake a stick at. At RSNA last year, the Radiological Society of North America, there were more than 70 vendors who exhibited in a machine learning pavilion, which was an area dedicated strictly to AI. And the vendors are broken into 2 primary areas. There's single solution vendors, which is probably 90% of the solution, or excuse me, 90% of the marketplace. And then there are consolidators, of which there are maybe 4 or 5. And what consolidators do is they bring in several different solutions from several different vendors and allow you to pick and choose. Sadly, what's happened is a lot of these products have been developed and not gotten the FDA's 510K clearance in the US. At RSNA, there were less than 20% who had a 510K clearance. Today, there's maybe, I don't know, maybe 10 more, 8 to 10 more who've had it. There are a few vendors who have 2 or 3 510Ks, like our host, but there are other vendors who still don't have one. So what that's led to is pretty much slow market growth. Mostly academic facilities are using it clinically, and non-academic facilities are using it as a proof of concept to see how things are going to work, and see how AI can provide a value add to their facility. So you got to look at why AI is being considered and when it's being used. And these are 5 of several different areas to look at. The potential to improve outcomes and patient care is absolutely number 1. It will provide faster diagnosis and quicker decisions at the point of care, maybe allow patients to not be admitted or to be admitted based on what the AI findings and in conjunction with the radiologist interpretation finds. It also has the potential to shorten the length of stay by providing a more accurate diagnosis and providing more information to the clinician so they can treat the patient. That will reduce the admission cost. Unfortunately, at least in the United States, that's until regulators and the insurance companies find out that, hey, the cost is it's costing them less, so let's pay them less. That's just the name of the game, unfortunately. But what it can also do is increase profits. If you have as few as a half a dozen admissions where a radiologist may have not thought the patient needed to be admitted, in the case, for example, of an intracranial hemorrhage, and AI found it, and so you admitted the patient instead of not admitting the patient, you can generate increased profits through that as well. There's also a tie-in with monitoring apps. It can definitely eliminate a problem before it becomes one. Identifying rare diseases is interesting, and it makes for great press, but it's such a small percentage of what AI does. It just looks good. And again, increased patient admissions due to higher diagnostic accuracy ties back in with increased profits. There are several factors that you need to consider when using AI. 1 is the user experience, 2 is the infrastructure, and 3 is the vendor evaluation.
And so just before we jump in, I'm going to take a small break because I think this is where we start thinking about the type of value, right, that we would envision our customers getting from AI. And I want to try something maybe new for some of you and maybe not for others. I'm going to launch a poll. So it basically means that you're going to see some questions on your screen. And I'm just going to ask you each to select one of the responses. And then we're going to be able to share these in real time and see who within our audience has already experienced some value from their AI solutions, or what is the expected value from these solutions. So I'm going to sort of give everyone some time to review this, and you can't see this on my end, but it's super exciting. There's a strong competition between workflow efficiency. Yeah, it's going up. Quality improvements, it's looking good. Amazing. Okay, I think that workflow efficiency it's going to be one of the leaders, and the quality improvement is a strong second. I'm going to give us 10 more seconds to go. And I'm super excited that everyone has cast their vote. This is great. Okay, let me share the results just so that we can all see them, and also have a reference point for Elad and Mike, who are going to be continuing from here. So this is super exciting and interesting, and I'm sure that that both Elad and Mike are going to be able to address this. And it's just very relevant that workflow efficiency was the number 1. So I'm excited that this is something that we're addressing in this presentation. Okay, over to you, Mike, to give us some of your industry expertise about user experience and your thoughts about workflow.
Well, it's interesting because the slide in radiology, workflow is everything. I'm actually, as an aside note, I'm working with a client of mine who has a PACS system, and we're trying to get through a vendor that the speed of display doesn't mean anything unless it can improve the workflow. That workflow is everything in radiology. And AI has to increase the workflow. And there's actually a slide that we have that will discuss the workflow in radiology. One of the things that we need to understand too, in terms of AI, is you can't selectively use it. You can't say this insurance company will pay for it, this insurance company won't pay for it, this is a private pay, this is somebody who can't pay. AI has to be used universally, not selectively. So when we use it, we have to factor in that everybody, again, using ICH or a breast tumor as examples, if you use AI for that application, everybody that's being screened for that application goes ahead and uses it.
So maybe Alad, can you give us a bit of your thoughts, I guess from a vendor perspective, right? When we go out and develop a solution that we want to see providing value. So what are the things that we think of when we think of workflow integration?
Thanks, Ariella. And thanks, Mike, for sharing your perspective on this. I must say that on our end, there was a penny that dropped a while back. And when we initially started this company, we spoke with a very well-known radiologist who basically told us that the key to good AI solutions is that you have to click no button and wait 0 seconds before seeing the results. And we had the perception of you have to create a solution that is always on, which means you can't have the user click or wait or do any action. But when I was looking back at the other solutions, the traditional, let's say a decade ago, CAD solutions or advanced visualization, the user always had to do something in order to see the results. And when we dug deeper into that, we noticed that let's say it's not because of a user preference, but it's because the user actually provides a lot of context for the machine in order for it to know what to analyze. So the big question of what exactly should the AI analyze apparently is a very, very difficult question. So to expand on that, when we run our triage on every head CT study, the question of what exactly is every head CT study in your organization is a very tough one. And the reason is that the metadata, which should be the machine intelligible part, is actually very noisy and highly variable. So when we typically connect to a PACS system or to a scanner, we get tons of different study descriptions, tons of different protocols with contrast, without contrast, different anatomical areas. They sometimes get they sometimes write the study descriptions wrong. You have typos in there. And the machine, unfortunately, doesn't have any other way of knowing what exactly it should analyze. So similar to reports, where you would definitely want to have a machine understand exactly what findings are mentioned in the report, because they're written in free text, you cannot extract those insights. Similarly, the metadata isn't easily extractable. So our takeaway from here was that either we have to choose a very narrow use case. So for example, in mammography, because it's a narrow use case, it's easier to define for the machine what exactly it should analyze. But if you want to create a broad AI, if you want to create a comprehensive suite of tools, we actually had to develop a whole nother layer of extracting insights from images and metadata. And I don't want to get too much deep into that, but what I would encourage you to look when you start evaluating the user experience is, first of all, understand if it is always on or the user has to do some sort of activity to choose what should the AI analyze. And second, understand that if it is always on, probably there is a whole nother technological layer under that is worth investigating with the vendor.
Thank you, Elad. And Mike, maybe you give us a few of your thoughts here on the infrastructure part, right?
That's correct. Thank you, Elad. Actually, what's on the bottom of the screen is the most important part of this entire slide. The radiologist must have the AI report before they review and dictate the study. You can't have a radiologist that's going to dictate a study and then suddenly read the AI report and then have to go back and amend the report or change the report or do anything else. So to Elad's point, you have to have the AI processed and available. So when the PAC study comes across, AI is with it in real time. And that determines whether you go with AI in the cloud or AI on the premises. There are pros and cons to each of these. The cloud, for example, requires a much higher bandwidth requirement, ideally a gigabyte to the cloud, but you can live with 100 megabytes if you have to, where on premises you don't have that. However, in the cloud, you don't have any additional hardware required. And AI is extremely CPU intensive. There's no hardware upgrades or replacement cost. You can host several applications. You can have several AI applications running in the cloud. Upgrades are installed automatically. And the biggest thing for almost every facility is that it comes out of the operating budget, not the capital budget. Now, all the costs are included from service and support on down. On premise, again, you don't have the wide area networks, but you have to make a place for the hardware. Any software upgrades that are done need to be manually done, and then you have to have capital budgeting, not just for the hardware, but for the initial hardware and the initial software, but annual hardware and software support fees as well as internal support as well. So there are pros and the cons. Certainly, the cloud speaks a lot more positive to AI processing in the infrastructure than on-premise, but you do have some people that want to maintain their own hardware, and you have some people that want a hybrid solution of on-cloud and premise both. So,
thanks, Mike. So,
and we talk about workflow, and workflow is everything. AI changes the entire reading dynamic. It can make it faster or it can make it slower, depending on what is selected in the findings. Again, to Elad's point, that's why an always on or having a system where it's processed in real time makes a difference. You've got three options with radiologist reporting. You've got AI only, where basically AI does the report, the radiologist reviews it. If he or she agrees with it, they sign off on it, and that becomes the final report. The equivalent of a canned normal in a regular report for CTM or nuke med, it's a canned AI report. But you must be able to revise the AI report. And sadly, only a few vendors allow you to modify that report. You can have the radiologist report only, just as it's done now. Only what the radiology dictates, he or she can review the AI report and then eliminate it. But again, only a few companies allow the report to not be included in the final version of what the radiologist dictates. And then you can have AI with the report, which has the radiologist dictation with the AI report attached. These are things that need to be discussed up front and things that need to be evaluated when you're dealing with particular vendors and doing vendor evaluations.
Thank you, Mike. And I'm sort of bringing us back to that the previous comparison that you had between the on-premise and the cloud. And maybe, Elad, you can share the thoughts that we had when we decided one or the other or both.
Yeah. And Mike, I think that the pros and cons of the cloud, it's something that we, as you can imagine, something we constantly think on. And actually, being in many conferences, I think there is a big debate about which is better. And I want to share from our perspective why both us and the vast majority, let's say 99% of our customers have elected to go through a cloud-based architecture. And at the end of the day, it boils down to scalability. And the AI space is right now moving very, very rapidly. So for us, for example, we had a new FDA clearance on average every 3 months. So we had one customer which decided to both deploy our solution from one hospital to the whole 7-hospital health system, and also to adopt each of our 3 solutions, which means he had to basically double the volume practically every couple of months or so. And the problem, if you do this on-prem, any significant change in terms of workload would require you to go back, talk again with IT, get the server installed, get all the authorization needed, and would just delay the pace of innovation. So what excites us and our customers and partners about the cloud is that they're able to consume the innovation at the pace that it basically comes. And when we do have, let's say, a new algorithm or an algorithm update, it's basically a flick of a button, and you can get the newest version of the AI. So for us, I think that the cloud holds the benefit of not just being cheaper, easier to update, but actually be able to support the scale of a very fast-moving market, which is the AI imaging market today.
It's interesting, Elad, the points you make about the cloud. They're very, very valid, and also, it was kind of funny. I had a client of mine that asked me, "Well, can I run AI on my PACS?" And when I finally picked myself off the floor from laughing, I said, "The server that you have now can barely take care of the PACS alone, let alone provide you with the computational power and the speed that AI takes." Besides the fact that, at least in the US, most of the servers are a minimum 3 to 5 years old, and they can barely deal with what they're dealing with. So the cloud offers so many advantages and benefits, but you do have some facilities, namely academic facilities, surprisingly enough, that like to maintain some of their own hardware for reasons that they feel are valid, and it's not my place to say if they are or not. But when you're doing that, you've got to, somehow determine, the best AI vendor. And there's 3 things that we look at here. One is the criteria to look at. Are they going to use it clinically, or are they just doing it for proof of concept to prove to the administration and others that AI can work? If you're using it clinically, and at least in the United States, you have one question and one question only that has to work, and that is, do they have a 510K? If they don't have a 510K, then you can't use it clinically. You also need to evaluate, though, even if they don't, if you're just doing it for proof of concept, look at the clinical studies. Did they have 1,000 folks? Where they trained the unit? Did they have 10,000? Did they have 100,000? How many studies? What was the study size? How objective was the study? Where was it conducted? Where was it published? How credible is it? Vendor experience in the marketplace, as I mentioned, there were over 70 people at the RSNA. Maybe, if I stretched it, maybe a dozen of those folks at the RSNA had had more than 2 years experience in the market. Most of them, it was their first time showing. And you've got to look at not the cost per study, but the total cost of ownership. How much is the initial installation? How much are the interfaces? How much is it per click? You got to look at the cost per study versus the value add. And when we really look at a total, there's single focus, single function AI, and then there's consolidators that offer you access to multiple players. But the cost differentials between the two are fairly significant. So you've got to look at that total cost of ownership and then go from there.
And maybe, Elad, even though your name isn't written up the top on this slide, maybe you can talk to us through, some of the vetting that we went through, right? When we meet potential customers, what are they looking, or what are they asking us?
Yeah, and Mike, I was very interested in hearing how you view vendor evaluation, because at the end of the day, it's such a new market that kind of everybody creates their own structure for this. And there are a lot of similarities, but I just wanted to share what is the typical process, I would say, we go through. there are always differences between how people evaluate us or other AI vendors. But I would say there are kind of 5 main criteria that people look at to evaluate if it fits them and fits them right now. So actually the first and most important thing is the 4th in this list, which is value. People constantly evaluate the accuracy, they ask me about the robustness, but I actually think that the biggest question is, does it really solve a pain point? What is the expected value out of this? Do you have a problem with your so for example, with triage, do you have a problem with your outpatient facilities? Do you have a problem with the ED? Have you just aggregated additional hospitals into your system and you want to make sure you have standardized care? Do you have a problem with outliers, with the average? You have all of those different options. And I think that understanding and crystallizing the value and making sure that it fits real clinical need, I think that is something significant to begin with. The second parameter, and Mike mentioned this, and I wholeheartedly agree, is the user workflow. It has to be seamless. It has to be non-intrusive. There are a few ways to do it. It could be fully integrated into the PACS and the RIS. It could be somewhat differently, but with an added functionality. But you have to look at the workflow integration and how it fits, how the user experience is. Second, the second parameter, which is tightly closed, is the integration and how much resources would the integration entail. Typically nowadays, you would want to make sure to test the AI before, I would say, go full throttle, which means you would probably invest IT resources before any other type of resource. So you want to make sure to reduce that barrier as much as possible. The third parameter here, how well does it work? I think that's the, let's call it the obvious one. Make sure to assess the accuracy, the robustness, make sure it's well validated in multiple clinical studies, in independent scenarios, on data that it hasn't trained on. Feel free to test on your own data, make sure that it works well and you can trust the reliability. Although at the end of the day, you'll have to kind of make the plunge and test it on your own data in a real setting if you really want to understand how well it works. And the fifth parameter, which you see here, is, I believe, also very important. Do you see this company, not just the solution and the product, do you see this company as a potential long-term AI partner? This market is in such early phases and it's going to evolve so much. You want to make sure that you choose a team and company that you can rely on, that you have a connection with, that you see that they have a long-term potential to be your partners. And I think it's something crucial that, and one of our emphasis in the whole collaboration cycle is make sure that together we find mutual value in every step of the partnership. So I would say it's a combination of a few factors, but I would encourage every healthcare facility or radiology practice to make sure to evaluate at least on those 5. So the workflow, the integration costs, how well it works, the value, and the company itself.
And I would also add a lot. You've also got to look at financial viability of the company. Who is making investments in the company? Some of these companies, I would say more than half of these companies, barely have enough money to stay in business through RSNA 2019. So you need to look at the financial viability of the company, who's making the investments in them, and where are those investments being spent as well. So.
Yep.
So over to you, Mike. I'll let you take us to the last couple of slides. We're on the half hour, so I think we're doing well. Okay. And I'll let you give us your padding thoughts.
Okay. So basically what you got to do is look at your requirements. Do you want to use AI clinically, or using it as a proof of concept before you bring in several different AI algorithms? Hospitals are just now getting into using AI clinically. Most of the AI initially was developed and brought in at the academic level, so the academicians could write papers on them and evaluate it and go from there. As we mentioned several times before, there's probably 20 or so companies that have a 510K out of the 70 plus companies who are competing in this marketplace. And there's just a couple of companies that have more than one clearance, that have more than one solution. It's also important to understand that a 510K is not required outside the US. So in the European market, in the Middle East, in Asia, and other areas, those are places where a lot of these companies that don't have a 510K are starting to play. Korea is another area where people are starting to play in the market because a 510K isn't needed. But if you are in the US, you need to have a couple of things. First is you need an internal product champion, somebody who is willing to go up to the wall and sit back and say, I want it, I need it, and it's good. You need to have some kind of justification showing a return on investment, because if it's not going to pay for itself, at least pay for itself, if not generate revenue, you're going to have a really hard time getting it passed through the chief financial officer. And then you need to also understand that there's no money budgeted for AI typically until 2021. So you need to get creative. You need to see if you can run it off the operating budget, or if you can piggyback it with a PACS upgrade. The integration cost with the PACS need to be factored in. Will the PACS vendor do their own interface or integration, or will you have to do it? Your best option actually might be going with an integrated AI solution from vendors who offer AI solutions, or a third party that have been integrated already. So you've got to go with a vendor who has shown, I can work with a Philips PACS or a Change Healthcare PACS or one of the major PACS vendors, and have done it and shown it. If they showed it already, then you know it can be done, and it will save you some revenue.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to open up for some questions. I'm going to read them. Some of the questions that were answered throughout the audience can see, and so I'm going to read out the ones that the audience haven't seen. So there's a question, maybe you, Mike, from an ROI perspective. I'm not sure how let's try. What is the ROI in terms of number of cases in years? I'm not really sure how we would address that. What are your thoughts from a financial perspective? And I think we said we were going to do a whole webinar on this, but maybe just some thoughts on how you can achieve ROI.
It's not really a number of cases per year. It's a fairly simple solution, and that is if you can bring in, say, 10 extra cases, if AI can help you diagnose a small bleed that you may not have gotten, a radiologist may have missed, for example, and you can admit the patient, then you can take the gross revenue, figure out what the net revenue is, and generate that AI helped you generate X amount of additional dollars in terms of that particular admission. Obviously, you can't take the gross because there's cost associated with it, but it doesn't take very many additional hits that AI would find to go ahead and help show the return on investment in there. So hopefully that answers the question.
I think so. And there's another one also sort of, well, it's more to do with the regulatory questions. How does the AI clinical diagnosis report or results? Okay, how are these controlled by a regulatory agency? Or maybe I guess Mike, do you want to try and deal with the regulatory side of it, or what do you feel?
Well, the regulatory is very simple. It either has a 510K or it doesn't. If it doesn't have a there's a secondary challenge that comes with it as well, is that there still is no ICD-9 code or CPT codes, both, for using artificial intelligence. There is some for a computer-aided detection, but the two are different. So you really can't be paid on that So you've got to look at, from a regulatory standpoint, if you have the 510K, that's the first thing that you're covering your tail. And the second part of it is that you need that to be able to get any form of reimbursement once the reimbursement is brought into the fold. That's why we look at additional procedures that we can do and things of that sort, because there is no code to reimburse for the use of AI currently in the United States. So you've got to be very, very cautious that you don't put the wrong code there and get yourself in a bind with CMS.
Okay, we've got more and more questions coming in. Let's just be conscious of time. I'm going to take a few more, and I think this one's for you as well, Mike. There's a question about your thoughts on AI vendors that have separate viewers to show their results. I mean, that's a bit towards our discussion about always on and on demand. Maybe you can sort of give us some thoughts on that.
Again, is it necessary to have a separate viewer? Depends on what that viewer brings to the table. We need to look at that on a case-by-case basis. What the particular viewer is going to do. It's just like with radiology reports and a primary care physician. It's great that a primary care physician can look at the entire radiologist report, but 98% of the time, all they're looking at is findings and impressions, and they're not going to read the entire report. So if there's a viewer that does something special, then that's great. But if not, I don't see the value in it at this point in time.
And I've got one on patient safety for Elad. Elad, do you want to read it out, or?
Sure. Yeah. So actually, I want to add one more thought about what Mike mentioned and the question about a separate viewer. And there is another question here I see about using DICOM norms to see results embedded in PACS. I think it's as Mike mentioned, I think it's a complicated dilemma. Because on the one hand, you want to create the seamless experience. On the other, if you only use the full PACS integration, you typically have a very limited feature set, probably limited by just showing annotation on images. So I think there is a constant battle, I would say, in terms of integration and a balance you have to maintain between making a seamless experience versus creating an enriched experience. And I think there are a few solutions to that, for example, such as context awareness viewers that don't require you to do as many actions in order to see the results. But in essence, I think it's one of the things that AI is challenged with because of the fact that the viewers themselves are controlled by the big companies, and it's not as scalable to go to each and every company to create a well-integrated viewer. So that would be for that. I see a couple of questions here about patient safety and data anonymization. So I want to share our perspective. Just to sum up for the audience here, a few physicians here noted that their hospitals are worried about patient safety and patient data and don't want to necessarily, or are concerned about cloud security. I think it's a valid point. I would recommend to require vendors to anonymize data on-prem before sending it to the cloud. I think it is a risk that is probably unnecessary. There are, fully HIPAA compliant workflows that you can send full patient information to the cloud, but I find it just more secure and makes more sense if you try and leave all patient information on-prem. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I fully understand the concern about the cloud, but the cloud is actually fairly safe. I mean, to protect the interest of the facility and of the radiologists themselves, what you should have with anybody that has a third-party software, just as they do with the PACS vendors, have yourself a BAA, which is a business associates agreement, that takes away a lot of the liability from the facility and the radiologist and puts it back on the provider to go ahead and provide the level of security that's necessary. DICOM anonymization certainly would do that, but it's just one more thing that you have to do, and it might slow up the workflow process.
I'm going to address, we have time for 2 more questions because we have 4 minutes, but I'm going to keep one fun one for the end. But before that, Elad, what type of measurable impact is AI making in the acute care setting versus outpatient. And there's also sort of a continuation is their research or anecdotal evidence related to patient safety, department efficiency, workflow, other sorts of KPIs. So maybe, again, can you discuss specific measurable impact in acute versus outpatient, and then is there any research?
For sure. And as it is a new market, or AI is, first AI FDA clearances were less than a year ago. So the impact is, the evidence is now just being gathered, but I think there is, the compelling evidence is starting to stack up. I think RSNA, you're going to have a boom of outcome research, hopefully, at least on our end, there's going to be. To share just one example of acute versus outpatient, we've measured the triage impact in both settings, and the difference that it makes. So in the acute setting, in the ED, typically you can, you reduce the turnaround time for, let's say on average, from 50 minutes to 30 minutes in one acute setting we tested it. But I think the biggest impact was for the outlier patients. There was a certain percentage of positive critical patients in the ED, which were up of 2 hours turnaround time. And it's just because of, you sometimes have peaks, you sometimes have patients that, just take longer than the usual. And I think the biggest impact would be for those patients. In the outpatient setting, we actually see it's even more impactful. The numbers we're seeing in several of our partners is 3 to 5% of their outpatients actually have acute findings. And you can imagine what it means for an outpatient that can wait sometimes 24 hours if they come, during the evening times, and can get treatment on the spot instead of leaving home for the night and then getting called back in. So this is just one example of a research that we have and will be presented in RSNA. And there are a lot more outcomes that I'm happy to share, but I think it's going to be hard to share all of the different outcome research we did in a couple of minutes.
So we've got the 1 minute left, and there's a great question, and I can let either you or Mike answer. What are our thoughts on how AI can help make radiology fun again? Take away anxiety, allowing radiologists to enjoy their life without worrying about missing findings. I think cool question. So we'll into that one.
We just had a Trump rally here in Orlando, so I don't know about making radiology fun again. If it's fun, you're going to make my son happy, because my son is starting his radiology residency now, much to his father's chagrin. But it's what we want is to be able to support the work-life balance that radiologists do right now. And that's one of the issues, is you're having to work a lot more hours to make the same amount of money. So if AI can assist a radiologist in terms of reading faster, reading better, providing a higher level of patient care, then definitely that will make the job more fun, and it will bring back that work-life balance that they used to have beforehand. Alad, you want to go ahead and address that as a closing statement?
Yeah. I think that the combination of AI and human is perfect to make things fun again. Obviously, AI can help with all the tedious tasks, measurement, comparison, detection, even things that, I would say a human doesn't necessarily want to do and want to elevate. We want to elevate the radiologist's position in the care pathway. We want to make sure they communicate more, diagnose more, and focus on that. I can share that with regard to peace of mind, I think that's one of the biggest things that the biggest feedback we get from our customers is actually about peace of mind. So one of those, especially in a very hectic, either outpatient or acute setting, and they have tons of cases in the list, and you can never finish them fast enough, but having an AI in the background, making sure that something critical gets flagged and treated on time, the feedback we get is that it does give them the peace of mind they need in order to kind of do their job with less interruptions. But I think there's definitely a long way to go for AI to fully augment the radiologists to make sure that we help radiologists focus on the parts that are both most fun and most impactful in terms of what they were meant to do.
Great.
Thank you both very, very much. And thank you everyone for attending and addressing, sending us great questions. The ones that we didn't have time to address, I'm gonna jot them down and get back to each of you separately if I can. So again, I'd like to thank you, Mike. It was great having you with us, and thank you, Elad, as well for taking our vendor approach to the next level. And so I will bid you all farewell. We will be sending a recording to everyone who registered, so this should be with you shortly.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.